Hey guys, how you doing? So we're in our third week now of doing class online. I hope things are going okay for you. Please email me if you're having questions or problems. I haven't had a chance yet to grade your assignments, but I will look at them soon. Um, Today I am talking about granular synthesis. I have to say too, this is the third video I've made. I discovered that my computer can't manage my laptop cannot manage the recording of a video and running the granulator at the same time. The granulator is quite intensive CPU wise, so that's the problem. So first off, let's look over here at Blackboard. I'm sorry I didn't post last week a kind of a week 10 update. I got kind of sidetracked by all these quizzes and didn't think about it. So thanks, Emily, for reminding me that it's good to have these posted for you so that you can work on these projects, and you can go here and it's kind of going to show you exactly what you need to do. So I'm going to be posting another video today about granular synthesis, which is a different type of synthesis that we're going to talk about. And what you're using as well is my granular synthesizer. So I designed a granular synthesizer in Max 8, and I will be using that as my instrument. As you know too, I've shared a folder with you called Granular Synthesizer, and in there is a Windows version and a OS X version of my granular synthesizer as a standalone application. You should be able to download it and just use it. So please download it and start playing around with it. But you obviously are going to want to watch this tutorial as well, because you can't Google any instructions about how to use my granulator, right? It's not an application you can buy. No one else is using it. So the only way you're going to learn how it works is by watching my video, okay? So, but there is granular synthesis in other applications. In fact, in Logic, if you go in Alchemy, Alchemy actually has a granular synthesizer inside it as well. If I go to advanced here, I can actually choose an audio file. I don't know. I can't, man, where is the granular? I don't remember. I think I have to go here. Oh, right. So see granular synthesis here. Yeah, I have to import a sampler. But it does say granular here because you can use the granular synthesizer in Max. Let me change one thing really quickly as well, because I really need you to be able to see this. So granular synthesis is a way of creating a sound by taking a sample, which of course is an audio file of some kind, and taking a particle or a grain of that sample and spinning it really fast, kind of in a blender. So imagine you take a sound file, you throw it into a blender, and you mix it up really fast to create a new sound with it. And in a way, that's what granular synthesis is. It's basically taking a sound and mixing it up so fast that it creates this texture in itself, okay? So, as you can see from my granular synthesizer here, there are two parts. There's part one, which is actually a granulator in itself, a granular synthesizer. And then there's number two down here at the bottom, right? And number two is here. And then the main mixer is down here at the bottom. That's where this is the main outputs of the volume. Here's the main volume control. And then individually, number two and number one have their own volume controls, okay? So there are a couple of parameters that you have to set before you make the granulator work, okay? There are two things. So once you open the granular synthesizer up, what you need to do is do two things. Down here it says configure DSP. You have to click on this and it pulls up this window right here. And this window is to turn on the granulator. Actually, there's several ways of turning it on, but also what I need to do is set my inputs and outputs, okay? So right now I can actually set my input device, my output device. Yours is probably gonna be like built-in stereo speakers or something like that. And then really useful here is turning on the scheduler in overdrive and the audio interrupt. Turning those two things on allows Max to prioritize timing over any other calculations, okay? So I can turn on the granulator by clicking this button here, or as you might have noticed, this little button down here, the speaker, if I click on that, it turns pink, and that also turns on the granulator, turns on the DSP, and the audio interface is now running, okay? So in order to turn the granulator actually on, I have to click this off button up here. See where it says off? If I turn this on, you should now hear the granulator. So let me grab an audio file that you can hear a specific thing so you hear exactly what it does. I'm going over, I'm on a different monitor right now. Hold on a sec. Music. So I'm just going to grab a single sound. There's a good one. So let me grab that and drop it in here. So this is a single sound that you just might have heard. Listen to it again. Oh, I just lost it. Oh, anyways, it's over here. So if I click here at the beginning, what's going to happen when I turn this on is it's going to start granulating. So listen to what happens. Okay? So you heard the repetition of this single sound, da 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 da, over and over, right? And there are a few things contributing to that sound. So let's talk about them initially. Let's talk about the most important features of a granular synthesizer, okay? The most important variables and parameters you have to change are, number one, the grain length, okay? And the grain length is how many milliseconds in length is a grain, all right? So, and let me just go down here and say one more time again, just for your information. In 1 second equals 1,000 milliseconds, right? Meaning that, you know, so the idea then, again, a half a second equals 500 milliseconds. And this is a common, you know, the millisecond is a very common measurement we use for sound, for length in Logic and in Ableton and Pro Audio, period, right? We see milliseconds everywhere. So the grain length then is determined in milliseconds. That's how long the sound is. The grain rate then is how often the grains play. And this is also, again, in milliseconds. I cannot spell milliseconds. There we go. Okay? So the grain rate then is determined how often these grains are played. Okay? So, and then the last most important feature is the grain transposition, which is basically the pitch of the grain. Okay? What is the note being played? How is the grain being played? Pitch based. All right? So let's look at the granulator then and talk about these specific features. You can see in this area right here, these are my three main parameters. I have the transposition, I have the grain length, and I have the grain rate, okay? And then over here in this window, when I drag and drop my audio, I can actually click in here anywhere and select the audio, right? And what this will actually do is if I click one time, every grain will start from that moment that I clicked, okay? So that'll be the start moment. It'll every play from that moment every time. If I select a range like this, it's now going to randomize inside this audio file. Every grain will be in a different place. Listen to how that sounds. Okay? So you can hear that it's randomizing the beginnings of those sounds. Let me also turn this reverb and delay off so you can hear just the granulator as it is. Okay, notice that some of them are quiet and some of them are louder than the others, right? So imagine if the grain is triggered here, it's going to be way quieter because that moment of the sound is way quieter. If it clicks here, it's going to be louder because it's louder at the beginning there. If it clicks here right at the beginning, or if it automatically triggers there, then it's going to be even louder. So this is really an important thing to remember about granular synthesizers. If you drag something that's really has a lot of variation, you're going to get a big variation in sound, and you have to be careful about the intensity of the granulator in your ears, okay? Because, you know, if I take a sound and I drag it in here that's really quiet but then has some loud moments, the granular can be very quiet, so I crank the volume up, and then I click in a spot in the file that has more decibels, and suddenly I get punched in the face, right, with a loud sound. So be aware of that when you're clicking around in here, that the intensity of the volume may change dramatically, right? If I click way down here and turn this on, it's almost inaudible, right? But if I click here, it's loud, okay? So just be aware of that, okay? All right, so the grain length then is about how long these grains are. Now I'm gonna switch to a different audio file so you can hear. I'm gonna actually use this sound here. Actually, no, let me take these peepers. Okay, so I recorded some peepers the other night at home here, and I dragged them in here. So listen now, right now, if I play this, let's hear what we get. Let me just select all of it. So right now, let me set the transposition for now to normal speed. So what's happening is that the grain length is 252 milliseconds, right? That's 1/4 of a second almost. It would be 250 if it was if it was 1/4. The grain rate is 109, which is almost 10 per second, right? Because if I have 10 times 100 is 1,000, that would make up 1 second. So I'm almost hearing 1 grain every second, or 10 grains per second. But I can change these numbers, okay? And these are selectable, meaning if I set a range on here, watch, it will randomize inside that range of the audio file. So notice that this number is changing now dynamically. Every grain is getting a randomized length. And this can really help to make your sound more dynamic and a little more consistent and beautiful. So watch what happens though, when now, if I'm gonna set my grain length to pretty long, 769 milliseconds, now let me turn the rate up. Watch what happens. So notice it got louder, right? And the reason it got louder is because suddenly I have way more grains overlapping, all right? Let me demonstrate this to you in Logic. So I made this little file in Logic. Let me show you the MIDI here, okay? So if, for instance, these are just random notes in Logic, all right? So right now, there's actually not a single note overlapping. So the sound is fairly loud because every individual sound is loud, right? But imagine these are grains from a granulator, okay? If I suddenly take all of them and lengthen them, then they start to overlap each other, right? And when they overlap, suddenly the volume is going to be louder. There are going to be more sounds at once. So listen to this now. Right, it's significantly louder because now I have overlap of my individual grains are overlapping so that at some points there are 5 notes at a time playing, right? And this could just get worse if my grain lengths are very long, okay? So be aware of that too. As I turn up the granular length and turn down the rate to be faster, then it will get louder as well because the notes will pile up, okay? So there's a couple things though so there are some ways of preventing that though. Let me just show you what I mean. Not preventing it, but there's a limit to what you can do. So if we go down here actually to the player, you can see actually that this is only 64 voice granulator, meaning that every time a note gets triggered, a sound gets triggered, it gets picked up by one of these grain players and it plays 64, it can play 64 of them at one time. But after that, they start getting cut off. So if for instance, the grain length is very long and the rate is very fast, then the notes will overlap and there'll be literally 64 notes at one time. And then it starts to cut off, like the first one will get cut off when it's re-triggered. Okay, you may even hear that as a little click as well. So anyways, so there is a hard limit of 64 notes at once, but it can get pretty loud if your rate is fast and your length is long, okay? And of course, if I set my rate to 200 and I put my grain length below 200, then I'll never have overlap. Okay? Now, one really nice thing to add here, throw some reverb and put some delay in here. This is the reverb, how much of the delay is going to reverb. It also helps to multiply the sound and glue it together nicely, okay? So let me turn my rate down and my grain rate up, okay? And if my grain rate is really long, it'll be smoother, right? But again, it's gonna take up more CPU, right? And it's gonna get louder. So anyway, so that is my grain rate and my length. I can also set this as a range and listen to what happens then. Every few seconds, you're gonna see the grain rate change. So this will also give you lots of variation as the grain rate changes over time, okay? So let's talk about the pitch now, okay? This pitch machine, the pitch generator here is really sophisticated actually. And allows me to do all sorts of really cool stuff. So I'm gonna actually set this to turn the keyboard off. And then you can see actually what it does is it gives me a range slider again, and it's going to play random notes inside based on this chord. Now, unfortunately, our peepers are not really a pitch, right? They're kind of noise based. So actually, let me turn the keyboard on. Let's hear what this sounds if I play a melody with the peeper sound. Oh, let me turn the Logic instrument off. Otherwise, that'll be making nasty sounds. All right, so hear this now. Yeah, so we can't really hear the individual pitches in here, but let me grab a synthesizer that I know plays an individual note. And I'm gonna actually select just a specific moment. Let's hear what we get here. Okay. So now watch when I play a melody. So now I'm actually able to play a melody with a granulator, right? With this moment in the sound. If I select click it once, I can choose a specific moment. Okay, and it's granulating that moment over and over. If I turn the grain rate really fast too, this will be smoother. Listen to this now. So anyways, but if I turn the keyboard off and I choose, for instance, natural minor, I can actually select a range and listen to what happens. So what it's doing actually is playing the one chord based off of the natural minor chords, based off of the note that is playing here, which is actually a C. Okay, so listen to what happens now when I go from 1 to 3 to 4. So I can actually granulate the sound, right? I can create this kind of texture based off of the original. And you can do some really beautiful and cool things here. You know, here's a cool recording. Listen to this. So my wife and I recorded this owl. These owls were fighting out in the woods the other night. And this is kind of pitch based. So if I play keyboard, so it's interesting because it really depends on what source you throw in here, what's going to happen in terms of the sound, right? What's going to happen in the granulator, how it's going to react. You can also, this is a really cool spot over here. You can see where it says pan, okay? Right now, manual just means that all of the notes are coming in right in the center, okay? If I hit LFO, I'm gonna get a low frequency oscillator. See how it's oscillating now back and forth from left to right, okay? And that will do exactly what you think it will. It will oscillate the sound back and forth, okay? But if I hit random, look what happens. It's going to randomize the panning. So it's going to kind of just wander around. The panner just kind of wanders, okay? If I hit scatter, this is one of the coolest. Scatter means every single grain gets its own space in this panning mix. Literally every single note gets a randomized value for pan, and it just sounds like little particles all over the place. Okay, so another thing to remember, I should mention this about grain length, is that the smallest length we can get here is 25 milliseconds, okay? And you'll notice that it almost devolves into just a clicking sound. So hear that noise? It's almost not even pitch-based anymore. It's just a single clicking almost, because it's so short that it barely is being recognized as an audio file or as a specific sound, right? Anyway, so let's talk about the last thing that I want you to try to do. So I want everyone to try and get the granulator up and running on their machine. And then the last thing, the way you would use granular synthesis in a application, for instance, is that you, or in Logic, for instance, right? Say you wanted to use some granulation in a song or something that you're doing in Logic. You have to record what the granulator does and then import that audio as an audio file and use it, okay? So, and the way we do that is this. What we do is, oh my God, there's sound of a chipmunk eating a nut in my wall of my house, and it's driving me nuts. So anyway, sorry. What I need to do is save. This is a weird mechanism, the way Max works in terms of recording. So the first thing I have to do is allocate the audio file. So the first thing I do is I click save, and I say grain test. I'm going to put this on the desktop, okay, and I say save. Now, Max is ready to record now, okay? So if I turn this on and I hit record, it's going to start recording everything Max is doing. This is my main output. So if I want to turn it up or down, I can click here. And when I'm done recording, I hit record again to stop. Now, if I don't hit record again to stop, I will not finish the recording process and it will not record the audio file, okay? So you have to record to start recording. While it flashes red, it's recording. And when you're done, you hit record again to stop the recording. If you don't finish the recording cycle, it will not save it, okay? So now actually I have an audio file here in Amadeus called, grain test, and here's my audio file. You can see the way it panned, okay? Why did it pan like that? I thought I had scatter on. Not really sure. That's kind of weird. But anyways, so I want you to play around with this and then try and record an audio file and see if it works, okay? Now again, the idea is that I can actually put several things in here and play them at the same time, right? So you can get some super weird mixes using both granulators at once, okay? And you have to manage your main output here, and that's right here. This is what's being recorded, so make sure you manage your gain output on both sides, okay? So actually, if you just move this slider, just make sure it's not clipping in this window, and that will record a good signal without clipping. This is the master mute button. It's also the M key on the keyboard. So if I want to turn the granulator off, I can just click that button, okay? And then on my next lesson, I'm going to talk about some of these other features, but I want you to try and get this up and running by Wednesday, and try and let me know via email or chat with me about whether it works for you or doesn't work for you, okay? And that is really your only assignment well, no, I'm sorry, that is a lie. You will have a quiz on Blackboard tonight that I'll put up about granular synthesis. And feel free to email me if you have any questions or send me a chat. And I will talk about these other things too. Please remember to be careful about volume, okay? Like if you click on a section that's loud, it's going to be louder in the granulator than like right here. That's a quiet moment. This is a louder moment, so I have to be careful. If I suddenly click here, it could get much louder, right? This audio file down here has the same thing, like all these big peaks. So just be careful with volume because it can punch you in the face if you're not careful with it. All right.